The Galactic Council was a vast assembly of the most powerful species in the galaxy, a coalition that had shaped the course of history for millennia. It was a place where the strongest and the most influential made decisions that affected entire star systems. Every species knew their place, and the Council worked hard to maintain order in the galaxy. Among these species, humanity had always been seen as the newcomers. While the ancient races had conquered worlds and built empires, humanity had only recently begun to explore space. It had taken them just a few hundred years to advance from their humble beginnings on Earth to becoming a force that could no longer be ignored. But despite this rapid progress, the humans were still seen as a young, inexperienced race by the more established species. For months, humanity had been negotiating with the Galactic Council. The Council had extended an invitation to Earth, hoping to bring them into the fold of galactic politics. Earth's resources were vast, and humanity had shown great potential, but the Council was cautious. They had a reputation for being the gatekeepers of galactic peace, and they weren't about to let just anyone waltz in without proving themselves. The talks had been tense. Humans had come to the negotiating table with their usual tenacity, but they weren't easily swayed. They had a unique perspective, one that didn't align with the established norms of the Council. This was a problem. The Galactic Council was used to controlling the flow of decisions, but humanity, with its rebellious nature and thirst for freedom, was proving difficult to manage. As the days passed, the tension in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council grew. Representatives from dozens of different species filled the enormous hall, exchanging words and glances of suspicion. They were not used to being challenged. They had ruled the galaxy for centuries, and now these upstarts from Earth were causing problems. On one side of the room, the Xelnar, a race of towering, six-armed beings, grumbled in dissatisfaction. They were ancient, wise, and feared throughout the galaxy for their military prowess. The Xelnar had always believed that humanity's rise to power had been too fast and too unpredictable. To them, Earth was an unknown, and it made them nervous. They had seen many races fall to the ambitions of the human race, and they feared that Earth might one day try to claim a part of the galaxy as its own. On the opposite side of the room, the quiet and elegant Elenari, a race of telepathic beings, whispered amongst themselves. Their delicate faces betrayed no emotion, but their thoughts were a swirl of concern. They had spent thousands of years perfecting their art of diplomacy, but humanity's approach to politics was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The humans had no respect for their age-old protocols, and it made the Elenari uneasy. If they didn't work with humanity carefully, there was no telling what might happen. But the humans remained unfazed. They stood firm in their negotiations, refusing to give in to the pressure of the Council. The humans' lead negotiator, Ambassador Maria Talon, was a force to be reckoned with. She was young by the standards of the other species, but she had a fierce determination that no one could ignore. Her sharp mind and strategic thinking had allowed her to navigate through the complex web of galactic politics without backing down. Maria had seen the other races for what they were: arrogant, self-serving, and far too comfortable with their power. Humanity, on the other hand, was just beginning to understand its potential. Maria knew that humans could play a major role in the galaxy, but only if they were allowed to grow on their own terms. She refused to let the Council dictate Earth's place in the galaxy. One evening, as the talks were supposed to be coming to a close, something unexpected happened. The humans had made their demands clear: fair treatment, equal representation, and the freedom to explore and expand without interference. The Council, however, had other plans. They wanted humanity to submit to their rules, to fall in line with the way things had always been done. The meeting room fell silent as the Council members waited for a response. The tension was palpable, and the air was thick with anticipation. All eyes were on Maria, the human representative. She had the fate of humanity in her hands. She could either accept the Council's terms and continue to work within their framework, or she could reject their demands and risk the consequences. Maria stood up, her expression calm but resolute. She looked out at the members of the council, her gaze sweeping across the room. The Selnar glared at her from across the chamber, their 6 eyes narrowing in suspicion. The Elenari watched intently, their minds buzzing with thoughts of what would come next. The pressure was immense, but Maria didn't flinch. She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady and strong. Humanity is not a pawn to be controlled. We will not allow ourselves to be dictated to by those who have ruled the galaxy for too long. We will not be forced into submission. The words echoed through the room, and for a moment, there was complete silence. The council members exchanged glances, shocked by the defiance in Maria's voice. This was not the response they had expected. They had anticipated a weak and frightened human race that would cower in the face of their power. But instead, they were faced with something much more dangerous, a species that was willing to stand up for itself. Without another word, Maria turned and walked out of the room, her head held high. The doors closed behind her, and the council was left in stunned silence. No one had expected this. The Xelnar were the first to speak. "What does this mean for the future?" One of them growled. "We can't let them defy us like this." The Elenari's leader, a tall, slender figure with shimmering skin, looked at the rest of the council members. "We may have underestimated humanity. They are not like the others. They are unpredictable. This could be a turning point for the galaxy." The council members were divided. Some argued that humanity had to be brought back to the negotiating table. Others believed that they should be punished for their insolence. But no matter what side they took, they all knew one thing: humanity was no longer a race they could control. As the council descended into heated debate, far away on Earth, the humans were already preparing for what came next. Maria had made her stand, but the real test had only just begun. The galaxy would not forget this act of defiance, and humanity would have to face the consequences of their decision. But for the first time in history, humanity was not afraid. They had made their choice, and they would face whatever came their way with the same courage and determination that had gotten them this far. The Galactic Council had pushed humanity to the brink, and now the humans were walking away. They would no longer play by the rules of the Council. The galaxy would have to adjust to the fact that humanity was no longer just a small, insignificant race. They had become a force to be reckoned with, and they were no longer willing to be controlled. The Council's chaos had just begun, and no one knew what the humans would do next. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council had been thrown into turmoil. The sudden and unexpected withdrawal of humanity from the negotiations had rattled the ancient species that had long controlled the galaxy. In the grand halls of the Council's chambers, representatives from every corner of the galaxy convened in urgent meetings, their discussions heated and filled with tension. On one side of the debate, the Selnar and the Tsaleth, a brutal insectoid species, were calling for an immediate response. They must be punished. The Selnar warlord, Cathar, thundered. His 6 arms flexed in agitation as he paced the floor. "We cannot allow such insolence to stand. The humans must be reminded of their place in the galaxy. We must send a clear message." The Tsaleth chittered in agreement, their mandibles clicking in synchronized rhythm. "They have disrespected the Council. Such arrogance cannot go unchallenged," the Tsaleth leader hissed. Their collective insectoid mind seemed to feed on the idea of domination, and they saw humanity's refusal as a threat to the established order. For species like the Xelanar and Saleth, who had long believed themselves to be the galaxy's rightful rulers, the humans were nothing more than a bothersome, upstart race. But not all members of the Galactic Council were so eager to deal with humanity in such a harsh manner. The Elenari, whose telepathic abilities allowed them to sense the deepest thoughts and emotions of others, were cautious. The Elenari counselor, Vidariel, stood in opposition to the call for punishment. "We must understand humanity's actions before we act," Vidariel said softly. "We've never dealt with a species like them. Their refusal is not an act of disrespect. It is a statement of independence. They are asserting their autonomy, and that must be respected. The tension in the room was palpable. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council was divided. The once united front of the Council seemed to be crumbling, and the species that had once ruled with unquestioned authority now found themselves questioning how to handle humanity. The debate continued late into the night, but no consensus was reached. Some pushed for swift retaliation, while others, like the Elenari, urged patience. The Council was at an impasse, and the uncertainty that followed was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Meanwhile, far from the halls of the Galactic Council, the humans were taking action. Earth's leaders had watched the withdrawal from the negotiations with a sense of pride, but they knew this was only the beginning. They had sent a clear message to the galaxy that they were not a species to be controlled or manipulated. But now, they had to prepare for the inevitable consequences. Ambassador Maria Talon, who had led the humans through the tense negotiations, gathered with Earth's top diplomats and military leaders in a secure underground facility. The room was filled with a quiet, determined energy. The risks were high, but Maria's face showed no sign of fear. Instead, it was set in a determined frown, as though she already knew what was coming. "Do you think they'll retaliate?" asked General Marcus Vance, Earth's top military strategist. He stood tall, his posture straight and unwavering. He had seen humanity face down greater threats before, but this felt different. The stakes were much higher. Maria nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. "It's hard to say. The Council is unpredictable. But one thing is clear. They won't take kindly to being defied. We need to be ready for anything." She turned to the holographic display in front of her, showing the current locations of the human fleets and military assets. "But we will not back down. We've shown the galaxy we won't be controlled, and now we need to ensure our security." The room fell silent as the implications of her words settled in. Humanity was no longer just a curious species on the fringes of galactic politics. They had asserted themselves in the most dramatic way possible. The galaxy was watching, and Maria knew the Council wouldn't let this insult pass without some kind of retaliation. But as the humans began their preparations for any potential conflict, the galaxy itself was beginning to shift. The ripple effect of humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council had already started to spread. Other species, who had been too intimidated or uncertain to speak out, were now finding their voices. On the planet of Earthar, home to the Krillith, a warlike species known for their ruthlessness, whispers of rebellion began to stir. The Krillith had long felt oppressed by the Council's rules, forced into agreements that went against their nature. Now they saw humanity's refusal as a beacon of hope. If humanity could stand up to the Council, maybe they could too. On the barren world of Vikor, the Drellians, a fiercely independent species, also began to reconsider their place in the galaxy. They had never been part of the Council, but they had long feared the power the Galactic Council held over the stars. The Drellians had remained neutral in the galactic struggle for power, but now they were beginning to entertain the idea of aligning themselves with humanity. The Council's grip on the galaxy was slipping, and the Drellians knew that this might be their chance to seize their own destiny. But for now, the Galactic Council was still focused on humanity. They were uncertain how to proceed, but one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer the meek and powerless species they had once been. They had shown their strength, their independence, and their willingness to defy the greatest powers in the galaxy. Back in the heart of the Council's chambers, the debate raged on. The Selenar, Salath, and other species continued to demand action, while the Elenari and a few others called for dialogue and diplomacy. But one thing had become undeniable. Humanity had ignited a spark, and that spark was spreading throughout the galaxy. No longer willing to accept the rules of the Galactic Council, humanity had opened the floodgates of change. It was only a matter of time before the full consequences of their defiance would be realized. But for now, as the Council was torn between their options, humanity was preparing for the next stage of the conflict. And whatever came next, humanity would face it with the same resolve that had gotten them this far. The galaxy was on edge, suspended in a tense stillness that seemed to echo through the stars. Humanity's unexpected withdrawal from the Galactic Council had sent shockwaves that rippled outward, affecting species both within and beyond the Council's reach. Everyone was waiting for the next move, waiting to see if the defiance of one species could truly unravel the centuries-old power structures that had ruled the stars. In the sprawling, multi-leveled citadel of the Selenar warlords, the mood was furious. Cathar, the Selenar leader, stood in front of a giant screen, his 6 arms folded tightly across his chest. His yellow compound eyes flashed with rage as the reports poured in from across the galaxy. The Selenar had always prided themselves on their strength, their ability to crush any opponent in battle. Yet now, humanity had dared to defy them, to walk away from the Council, and they were unsure how to respond. This was an insult, a challenge to their power that could not go unanswered. "We must act," Cathar growled, his voice vibrating with fury. The humans believe they can simply walk away from the Council, from the galaxy's power. They must be brought to heel. One of his aides, a smaller, quicker Selenar scout, hesitated before speaking. "But sir, they have already proven themselves dangerous. Their ships are unlike any we've seen before. We can't afford to underestimate them." Cathar slammed his fist onto the table, sending the aide flinching back. "I am not underestimating them," Cathar snapped. "I am saying we strike before they grow stronger. If we wait, the humans may not only defy us, they may replace us." Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the Elenari, the telepathic species who had urged caution in the Council meetings, were facing their own dilemma. The news of humanity's actions had reached them like a wave, crashing against the calm certainty they had known for centuries. Vidariel, the Elenari representative, sat in quiet meditation, trying to make sense of the unfolding chaos. The Elenari had always acted as peacekeepers, intervening when conflicts escalated, but now they were unsure what role they could play. They had always prided themselves on understanding the thoughts and intentions of other species, but humans were different. "They're not like us," Vidariel murmured, barely audible to anyone nearby. Her voice was full of quiet awe and concern. Humanity had not only refused to be ruled, they had embraced the idea of independence. The Elenari had always followed the will of the Galactic Council, but now, for the first time, the Council was divided. What was peace if one species would not conform to the rules? The galaxy's powerful factions were all responding in their own ways. The Tsalath, the insectoid species that had once subjugated entire planets, were sharpening their war plans. The Krillith, the brutal warriors from Arthar, were considering their options as well. In every corner of the galaxy, the seeds of rebellion had been planted. The idea of challenging the Galactic Council was no longer an impossibility. If humanity could do it, others might follow. Back on Earth, Ambassador Maria Talon and General Marcus Vance were facing the reality of what their withdrawal from the Council meant. Despite the initial relief and pride they had felt, they now knew they had made an enemy of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But they also knew that they had taken control of their fate, for better or worse. The Galactic Council had taken its first steps toward collapse, but humanity had no idea what forces they had unleashed. Maria's fingers hovered over a holographic display of the human fleet. Thousands of ships, each one more advanced than any the Council had seen, were ready to mobilize. Humanity had invested heavily in its military, not to dominate the galaxy, but to ensure their independence. The withdrawal from the Council had been just the first step in their greater plan. Now, Maria and Marcus faced the daunting task of maintaining humanity's freedom in a galaxy full of hostile species who no longer saw them as equals. "We need to prepare for the worst," General Vance said grimly. "If the Council doesn't back down, we'll have to fight. The galaxy won't take kindly to our defiance." Maria nodded, her gaze steady as she studied the fleet's movements. "We won't back down either. We've proven that already." It was a pivotal moment. Every star system, every species, was watching to see how the Galactic Council would respond to humanity's bold defiance. Would they retaliate, or would they try to make peace? The outcome of this unprecedented situation would shape the future of the galaxy, and humanity would not bow to anyone again. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. The once unshakable Galactic Council was now divided, its members struggling to maintain control over the galaxy's numerous systems. The sudden defiance of humanity had opened a rift between the ruling powers, and a series of urgent meetings were being held on the highest level. While some pushed for diplomacy, others were already preparing their forces to confront the humans. The stakes had never been higher, and no one knew exactly how this would play out. Inside the Council's grand chamber, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The various leaders of the most powerful species in the galaxy were gathered in a circle, their faces grim as they deliberated. The holographic projections of their star systems flickered above them, and the silence between them was deafening. Thar, the leader of the Excelnar, was the first to speak. His 6 arms moved restlessly as he addressed the others. The humans have humiliated us. They've rejected the Council's authority, and they are preparing to stand alone. This is unacceptable. We cannot allow this challenge to go unanswered. Vidariel, the Elenari representative, calmly raised her hand, her voice soft but filled with authority. We must be cautious, Kithar. Humanity is not like the species we have faced before. We cannot assume they will fall easily under the weight of our might. Their independence may be something we have to understand before we react. The Tsalef, the insectoid race that had long used fear to control others, chittered among themselves in their native tongue. Their leader, a towering figure named Zrax, finally spoke up, his voice dripping with venom. The humans are weak. They are small, fragile creatures compared to the strength of the galaxy's true rulers. They cannot hope to survive a confrontation with us. But Vidariel's words lingered, and even Kithar had to pause before responding. The galaxy's greatest minds knew that underestimating humanity had already proven costly. The humans had not only withdrawn from the Council, they had built a powerful military force capable of defending their independence. The display of their advanced ships and technology had caught the Council off guard, and many now questioned whether they had underestimated humanity's true potential all along. Back on Earth, General Marcus Vance and Ambassador Maria Talon were preparing for what they knew would be the hardest battle humanity had ever faced. The Council was not a group to take lightly, and the response they would receive could very well determine the fate of their species. As the days passed, messages arrived from various neutral systems offering support and counsel. Some encouraged humanity to stand firm, while others warned of the dangers ahead. But humanity had made its choice. The negotiations were over. The time for peace had ended, and now, the galaxy would witness what happened when humanity fought for its right to exist on its own terms. Are we ready? Maria asked, looking at the rows of technicians working to maintain the fleet's readiness. The quiet hum of the massive warships echoed through the command center, each ship a testament to humanity's resolve. We are, Marcus said firmly, his eyes scanning the fleet's movements. We've spent years preparing for this. If the Council wants a fight, they'll get one. As the situation unfolded, the tension was felt across the galaxy. The neutral systems, those who had remained in the shadows of the Council's power, now began to make their own decisions. Some aligned themselves with humanity, offering covert assistance and strategic support. Others, too fearful of the Council's wrath, remained silent, unwilling to risk their future on such a precarious alliance. But one thing was certain. Humanity's decision to stand alone had ignited a firestorm of change throughout the galaxy. No one could predict the outcome, but all knew that the old order was crumbling. The very structure of the galaxy's power was shifting, and the Galactic Council was beginning to see that their reign over the stars was no longer as unassailable as it once had been. In the depths of the galaxy, far beyond the Council's reach, The first signs of rebellion were quietly taking shape. Independent systems, once relegated to the fringes of the galaxy, were beginning to whisper of the possibility of independence. What humanity had done was not just an act of defiance. It was a beacon for others who had longed for freedom from the oppressive rule of the Council. Back at the Council meeting, a decision was made. It was clear that negotiations had failed, and the only option left was to confront humanity head-on. The Xelenar would lead the charge, followed closely by the Salith. The Elenari, despite their caution, had reluctantly agreed to back the decision, though Vidariel's heart was heavy with doubt. She knew that this was no simple confrontation. It was a turning point in the galaxy's history. As the representatives began to leave the chamber, each one lost in their thoughts, the holographic projections of the galaxy continued to spin, a constant reminder of the scale of what was at stake. The battle for the future of the galaxy had just begun, and humanity's place in it was now a matter of life or death. The Council's attack was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy, once brimming with the busy hum of trade routes, peaceful diplomacy, and carefully planned negotiations, now sat on the edge of chaos. The Galactic Council's decision to move against humanity was not just a military one. It was a statement, a declaration that the time for human defiance had passed. But despite the great pressure mounting against them, humanity remained resolute. The battle lines had been drawn, and the first wave of conflict was about to begin. Back on Earth, General Marcus Vance stood in the war room of the human fleet's headquarters, staring out at the holographic map of the galaxy before him. His mind raced as he reviewed the intel and considered the potential consequences of the coming battle. The fleet was ready, but no one could truly predict the full extent of what would happen when humanity and the Galactic Council finally collided. "We've trained for this," Marcus muttered under his breath, as if trying to convince himself more than anyone else in the room. The soldiers under his command, each handpicked for their strength and skill, were the best humanity had to offer. They were prepared to face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before, an enemy that would stop at nothing to subdue them. Ambassador Maria Talon entered the room, her steps deliberate. She held a series of encrypted messages in her hands, direct communications from several key systems that had either pledged their support to humanity or promised to remain neutral. Maria looked at Marcus, her face a mixture of concern and determination. "More systems have pledged their support," she said, her voice steady, though a tinge of anxiety could be heard beneath the calm exterior. "Some of the neutral systems are starting to take action. If the Council goes to war with us, they might find themselves facing more than just Earth." Marcus nodded. He understood the magnitude of what was unfolding. Humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were now leading a movement, and it was quickly gathering momentum. The Council, though powerful, had underestimated the strength of unity among the smaller systems, and humanity's refusal to bow to their demands had become a rallying cry for those who had long suffered under the Council's oppressive rule. But Marcus knew that the first move had to be humanity's. They had no choice but to strike first. If they waited for the Council to make the first move, the outcome would be disastrous. Time was running out. Meanwhile, far beyond the reaches of human space, the Galactic Council was beginning to prepare for the inevitable. The Xelenar, fierce and aggressive, had already begun mobilizing their fleets. They believed in their might, in their centuries-old supremacy over the stars. The Salath, with their brutal tactics and massive insectoid forces, followed closely behind. Together, they formed the spearhead of the Council's retaliation. However, not all was as unified as the Council would have hoped. There was unease among some members, particularly the Elenari. Their leader, Vidariel, had always been a voice of reason, advocating for cautious diplomacy over military action. She had once believed that humanity would submit to the Council's will, just as countless other species had done before them. But now, seeing the resolve in the eyes of humanity's leaders, she had begun to question her own convictions. She found herself alone in her chambers, pondering the situation, staring at a hologram of Earth. The blue planet had seemed so insignificant when viewed from the vastness of the galaxy, yet its defiance had caused a ripple that was now spreading throughout the stars. What are they thinking? Vidariel whispered to herself, her fingers grazing the edges of the hologram. How could they have known they would make this stand? How could they be so sure? She knew the answer. Humanity was unpredictable. It was that unpredictability that had made them a threat to the Council in the first place. The humans had not followed the expected path of submission. Instead, they had fought back, and now they were on the brink of war. She could not help but feel a deep sense of respect for them, even as the Council's actions would likely lead to their destruction. Vidariel's internal conflict was interrupted by the sudden arrival of the Council's Supreme Commander, Cathar. The Selnar leader was a towering figure, his presence imposing and unyielding. His cold, calculated gaze was enough to make even the most seasoned diplomat uneasy. "Vidariel, I trust you've seen the latest intelligence reports," Cathar said, his voice deep and commanding. "We will move forward with our plan. Humanity must be shown their place." Vidariel didn't respond immediately, her thoughts still swirling. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady, but with an edge of uncertainty. "I've seen the reports, Cathar. And I've also seen humanity's resolve. This war may not go as we expect." Cathar's expression hardened. "You doubt our strength, Elenari. We will crush them. The humans may be resilient, but they are nothing compared to the might of the Council." Vidariel didn't argue further. She knew better than to challenge Cathar in front of others, but she could not shake the nagging feeling that humanity was not a foe to be underestimated. The galaxy was about to be plunged into a conflict unlike any it had ever known, and no one, least of all the Galactic Council, could predict how it would end. As the preparations continued on both sides, the galaxy held its breath. The first strike was imminent, and the consequences of the coming war would reshape the future of the galaxy. It was no longer about simple negotiations or diplomatic measures. It was about survival, and humanity had made it clear that they would not go down without a fight. The calm before the storm was now over. The galaxy would soon know the true cost of underestimating humanity. The time for negotiations had passed. The Galactic Council, once filled with confident leaders who believed in their undeniable supremacy, was now caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty. Earth's unexpected withdrawal from talks had left them on edge, and their arrogance was finally beginning to waver. The Council's fleet, the most powerful and vast military force in the galaxy, was ready for war. They had the numbers, the technology, and the experience, but there was something they had never counted on: humanity's will to fight. General Marcus Vance stood at the heart of the human fleet, surrounded by the hum of activity as the final preparations were being made. It had taken everything they had to get here. Their ships were fueled, their weapons loaded, and their soldiers ready for the worst. For Marcus, this wasn't just about fighting the Galactic Council. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity would not be enslaved, and they would not back down. The command center aboard the flagship, Ascendant Fury, buzzed with urgency. The holographic screens flickered with reports and battlefield projections. Humanity's fleet, though smaller in numbers compared to the Galactic Council's forces, had a singular advantage. They knew how to fight with cunning and resourcefulness. Their enemies were accustomed to overwhelming force, to crushing their foes with sheer power. But humans were unpredictable, an advantage that no one, not even the Council, could plan for. "General, the fleet is ready," Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins reported. She was a seasoned officer, and her calm demeanor contrasted with the tension in the room. "We've synchronized the jump coordinates. The Selnar fleet is at the edge of the system. We're set to engage." Marcus nodded, his face hardening with resolve. "No second chances," he said firmly. "Once we engage, there's no going back. But we're not here to lose. We're here to win." The plan was simple, but dangerous. Humanity would launch a surprise attack on the Council's fleet, exploiting weaknesses in their formations and using their smaller ships to outmaneuver the larger, bulkier ships of their enemies. The Council's arrogance had led them to believe that humanity would not dare to strike first. Now, they would learn otherwise. As the human fleet made its approach, the Council was still in the dark. The Xelnar Tsaleth and other species in the Council had begun to mobilize in anticipation of a counterstrike, but they hadn't expected the humans to move so swiftly. Suddenly, a harsh alarm blared across the fleet's communication systems. Alert! Enemy ships detected at coordinates 7-43. The voice of an officer crackled over the comm. It's the human fleet. They've initiated an attack. The Council fleet scrambled, but it was too late. Marcus had already anticipated their move. In an instant, the human fleet had dropped out of warp and was already closing in. The first shots rang out, bright blue plasma blasts streaking through the void, targeting the heart of the Xelnar fleet. The battle began. Humanity's ships, though fewer in number, moved with incredible speed and precision. The larger, slower Xelnar vessels fired back, but their heavy artillery was no match for the nimbleness of the human ships. The humans were relentless, using their smaller ships to launch rapid hit-and-run attacks, weaving in and out of enemy fire with remarkable agility. But the fight wasn't one-sided. The Xelnar retaliated fiercely, sending their flagship, the Wrath of Xelnar, into the fray. It was a massive warship, bristling with weapons, and its advanced shields were designed to withstand even the most powerful of attacks. It fired relentlessly, its weapons tearing through the space where the human ships had once been. But the humans were prepared for this. As the Xelnar flagship charged, a series of human warships launched a coordinated strike, targeting the flagship's weak points, its engines, and shield generators. The Ascendant Fury led the charge, unleashing a barrage of missiles and plasma charges that detonated with a series of bright explosions across the Xelnar ship's hull. The Xelnar flagship began to tremble, its shields failing under the human assault. For the first time, the Galactic Council's fleet faltered, and panic began to ripple through the ranks. "Target their shield generators. Fire all remaining weapons," shouted the commander of the Wrath of Xelnar, his voice filled with panic. But it was too late. Humanity had taken the upper hand. On the battlefield, chaos reigned as humanity's fleet outmaneuvered and outsmarted the Xelnar forces. The Galactic Council's once feared fleet was beginning to crumble under the pressure, unable to adapt to the humans' unpredictable tactics. Their carefully laid plans were turning to dust, and fear began to spread among the Council members. The humans were not the weak, naive species they had believed them to be. They were dangerous. Back aboard the Ascendant Fury, Marcus watched as the battle unfolded. His face remained stoic, but inside, a fire burned. The first strike had been a success, but it was only the beginning. They had proven that humanity could hold its own, but there was much more to do. The Galactic Council would not give up without a fight, and humanity would need to stay one step ahead. "Prepare for the next phase," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We've got their attention now. Let's make sure they know who they're dealing with." The fight for the galaxy had just begun, and humanity was no longer the underdog. They had stepped onto the battlefield with a defiance that would echo across the stars. The Council would soon realize that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and they would not be easily crushed. The dust of the battle settled slowly as the wreckage of the once mighty Xelnar fleet drifted through space. Humanity's unexpected and ferocious assault had left a clear mark on the Galactic Council. The Council had always been a collection of the most powerful and ancient species in the galaxy, their dominance uncontested for millennia. But now, their vast, impenetrable forces lay shattered, and they had been forced to confront the one thing they had never believed possible, that a species like humanity could defeat them. And not only that, humanity was no longer afraid to fight back. In the wake of the battle, the Council called for an emergency session. The chambers were full of leaders, each one a representative of their species, their faces strained with tension. Across the room, Holographic images of the destruction flashed, highlighting the scale of the damage. The once proud Selenar fleet was crippled, and several other fleets had suffered severe losses. It was a nightmare for the Council, and they could feel the shift in the balance of power. "We underestimated them," said Lord Thalrax, the Salif High Commander, his voice sharp with frustration. "The humans are not the primitive species we thought them to be. They have weapons, tactics, and resolve that we were not prepared for." The Salath were known for their vast intelligence, yet even they had been caught off guard. They had believed their superiority would remain unquestioned. But now, they were left questioning everything they had ever assumed about humanity. "This is not just a loss in battle," said Queen Jayla, the Selenar monarch. Her face was a mask of stoic calm, but her eyes betrayed her shock. "This is a crisis. Our fleets are in disarray, our credibility in question. Humanity is no longer a distant concern. They are a threat." Across the chamber, representatives from other species exchanged uneasy glances. The once mighty Galactic Council was beginning to crack. The humans had proven they could not only survive, but fight back with overwhelming force. The Council's belief in their dominance was fading fast. The room fell silent as the president of the Galactic Council, the leader of the most powerful political body in the galaxy, stood to address the assembly. His expression was unreadable, but the weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. "We can no longer ignore this threat," he began, his voice low and commanding. "Humanity has crossed a line. They've shown that they are willing to fight, to do whatever it takes to protect their sovereignty. We cannot allow this challenge to go unanswered." The decision was inevitable. The Galactic Council, despite its previous underestimation of humanity, would now have to respond in force. They would have to strike back with everything they had. The war that was once only an unsettling thought in the back of their minds was now an unavoidable reality. But the Council knew that the humans would not be an easy enemy to defeat. The battle at the heart of their galaxy had only just begun, and the humans had already demonstrated their ability to strike fear into the hearts of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, General Marcus Vance stood before the holographic map of the galaxy, his hands clasped behind his back. The first strike had been a victory, but Marcus knew it was only the beginning. Humanity had revealed its strength, but the Council would regroup, and they would come for Earth with everything they had. But Marcus wasn't worried. In fact, he felt more confident than ever before. "Let them come," Marcus muttered to himself, his voice full of cold determination. "We'll be ready. We've shown them what we're capable of. And now, they'll learn what it truly means to face humanity." The leaders of the Galactic Council had no idea what was coming next. They believed they could crush humanity, but they had forgotten the one truth that no amount of strength or technology could change. Humans were resilient. They didn't give up. They didn't surrender. And they fought for what mattered. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity wasn't just a species. They were a force of nature, a challenge that would not be easily erased from the stars. As Marcus gazed out at the vastness of space, a chill ran down his spine. The Council had underestimated them, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Humanity's fight for survival had only just begun, and soon, the galaxy would know that they had made a dangerous enemy. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity would never be pushed around again.